Welcome to the next video in my scripting series. So in the previous video, we took a look at the importance of entity IDs. In this video, we're going to take a look at another thing that's vitally important to scripting, is the importance of debugging your code and how to do so and why you should do so. So before we get into the actual debugging stuff, let me show you something that's really important to enable first of all. So by default, this isn't enabled when you load RPG in a box, so you have to find this and turn it on. But what you want to do is you want to go to Game Configuration up here, double click this and go to Settings. Should be open by default anyway, but find the Settings tab, and in the General section at the very bottom there's an option called Debug Console. You want to make sure that's on. This is only available while you're making your game. Once you export the game and distribute it out to other people to play, you don't have to turn this off in order to do so. Your games that you export won't have this on, so you can leave this on all the time. It's an incredibly useful thing to turn on, so I would say turn it on straight away because it's going to be invaluable to the development of your games. So I'll show you in a second what the debug console is for, but let's quickly take a look at and talk about the topic of debugging. So in RPG in a Box, there are two specific functions that are used typically for debugging, but one of them you can use for game design as well. So one of those is the node log message, the function log message. So if we drag that in, that's what it looks like, and this is the code, log_message, and in parentheses and in quotes, hello world. Okay. The other one is print to console. If we drag that in as well, that's what it looks like, print, and then the message inside, and this is what the node looks like. Okay. The difference between log message and print, well, in fact, I'll show you. Let's save the script and let's quickly run the game. And let me bring down the console. This is the debug console. It's brought down by pressing it depends on the keyboard. So once you've got it enabled, probably the best thing I can say to do is just press every key until eventually it appears, because it's either one of two things. It's either the key that's directly below the escape key in the top left of the keyboard, which is what this keyboard's key is, or it's the key underneath the @ symbol. And it also depends on the language of your keyboard. So as I say, it's such a varying button that brings down the console that it's easier just to say press all the keys until eventually this appears. It will eventually appear as long as you've enabled the debug console in the game configuration section. As long as that's on, this will eventually appear. And obviously when it does, note the button, note the keyboard key for you that brings it down. Okay. So this is the debug console. Okay. And from here, for example, we could execute our script. Okay. And if I run that, notice how we see hello world in the top left corner of our game. And if I bring the console down again, we see debug message in the console itself. Okay. So if we go back to our script, we can see that hello world is the text that appeared in the top left corner of the screen, and debug message is what was inside the console. So that's what these two things do. Log message puts a message to the top left of the screen, and print to console puts the text into the console. It's entirely up to you which one of these you use. Print to console just hides the text away, so if you don't want it on screen all the time, that'd be why you would use it. But log message is good if you really want to just have it out in the open as you're testing what's the messages that are coming back. Now, one I like to use personally, and it's not typically used for debugging, but I personally like to use display message. Let me drag that in as well. Now, obviously, what display message does is this is a bit like a dialogue. It will bring up a dialogue screen. So just to show you all the types, this is the message. This, oops. This is the log. This is the console text. Okay, and that's what the code looks like for each of those. Okay, so let's just quickly run that one more time. Also, I've got to save the script. So again, we bring down the console, we'll execute our script, and here's the three messages. So this is the log, this is the display message. I should have put display message, but you get the idea. And then this is the console text. So those are the three different types of debug options you have available to you. Typically, people don't use display message for debugging. They use it for dialogue and messages in their games. The reason why I use display message for debugging is that it pauses your scripts. So going back to this script, if I was to put, for example, these, we just quickly edit and cut those out of there and put them underneath, then these aren't going to be run until I've clicked the display message. So this will pause the rest of the script. So this can be really useful for debugging your scripts and having them pause while you check the information that you need to check. Okay. Now that we've discussed the three types of functions for debugging, let's talk about what is debugging. What would you debug? What's the purpose of it? So going back to the topic we were talking about in the previous video, where we were talking about entity IDs, I mentioned the value self. We were talking about how self is a dynamic reference depending on the entity that that script is attached to. Again, refer to the video on entity IDs, the previous video in this series, to understand the context of what we're talking about in this moment. But going back to that, we might want to check what currently is self assigned to. So we could, for example, print self, and then that will put into the console what self currently is. So for example, let's put this into a practical sense. Let's say we cancel all of this. Let's close. Let's leave the log message. We'll just use the log message. And what we'll do is we'll log message self, and we'll apply and save. And then what we'll do is we'll go to our map editor and we'll put this script onto when player interacts with this NPC. So now if we save and run the game, when we interact with this NPC, in the top left here, the log message has come back with self being a reference to the character Justin, and that was his initial coordinates at the time. That's where he currently was when I interacted with him. So that shows us that self, in this case, is a reference to the Justin character, which makes sense because the script is attached to that Justin. So that's why self would come back as Justin. If I was to just now type print self, it's probably going to come back as nothing, but actually comes back as a tile, interestingly enough. I wonder why that is. I wonder if it's because that's what the cursor was over. Let me put the cursor over empty space and try that again. No, it's still coming back. I'm not sure why it's coming back as a particular tile, but there you go. But going back to our script. So log message and print to console and display message, the reason why they're useful is, let's say you had a script where it wasn't working properly. Let's say you had a variable set to something like $max equals entity, and then in brackets would be the ID. So let's say Justin_free dot model equal dot model, let's say. So it equals the model, okay? And then we're saying if $max equals Sarah, let's say, then do something else kind of thing, okay? Let's say this particular bit is not working. It's supposed to do something like display a message or something, but it's not working. So what we can do is, before we get to this bit of script, I can put a display message in, and I can display max. And what that will do is that will show me in this current script, while I'm playing the game, it will show me what this is set to. And so I can see with my own eyes if this is correct. Because if this isn't correct, then of course this isn't going to work. So instead of blindly guessing, why is my script not working, I can suddenly get my script to start speaking to me. Like, start telling me why you're not working. Is this variable set correctly? You know? Because unless you print these things like display message or print or log message, unless you get your scripts to return back to you their values, and you just blindly don't know what it's doing, you're just assuming it's doing things correctly, then that can be where a lot of problems come in with your scripts. So the first part to diagnosing, troubleshooting problems with your scripts is to check the variables and things are set to what you expect them to be. Because 9 times out of 10, the problem with scripts is because they're not set to what you think they should be. So then the question becomes, why are they not set to what they should be? So if I, for example, display message max, and it comes back as Justin, which you would expect because entity Justin free, the model would be Justin, right? But my script is checking for Sarah, then I now realize, oh, the problem is I've set this to the wrong thing. This is the wrong model. But I can see that mistake now, because in game, the display message is going to come back as Justin. Justin is going to be very, I'm not going to run the game, so it just takes too long, but the display message would pop up and it would have this text. It would say Justin in the display message. So I would suddenly go, well, hang on a minute, it's supposed to be Sarah. And then I would go back to my code and I go, oh, I've set the wrong entity. It should be entity Sarah1 or something like that, different type. Yeah, and now all of a sudden I've got the right model. So now my if statement will work, because I've now I've fixed the error in my script. So debugging is valuable for troubleshooting your own scripts, and it would be the first step before, going to Discord. Obviously, no harm in asking, but obviously, 9 times out of 10, we'll probably ask you to debug your scripts anyway. So it's incredibly valuable to do, because it just helps you already start to troubleshoot where issues with scripts can lie. And as I say, you can use display message, because the nice thing about display message is it won't do the if statement until we've read it. So we can see what it's set to before it then proceeds to do the rest of the script. Whereas log message would give us, it would carry on executing the script. One important thing to know about log message is that, let's put it back to log message if we can. There we go. One thing to know about log message is, let me write a message in quickly. And I'm going to copy and paste 5 more versions of this. Message 2, message 3, message 4, message 5. In fact, what I'm also going to do is I'm just going to put a wait of 1 second in between each log message. There's a reason I'm doing this. It's just to explain how log messages work. Okay, let's quickly run this script. So if we quickly execute script 1, so we see message 1, message 2, message 3, message 4, message 5. Now you see that what happened is it showed each log message underneath the other, but it only shows a maximum of 4, and then the first one gets overwritten by the second one as it pushes it up. Does that make sense? So if I was to add another message, message 2 would disappear, message 3 would now be where message 2 is, and message 6 would be the next one underneath 5. Does that make sense? Now, they will stay on screen forever unless your script also has clear log. And then that will clear everything. So clear log is the code that you would put in a script. So we could put, for example, wait 10, that would be a 10-second wait, and then clear log would be how you would then clear those messages. Okay, so that's useful to know about how log message works. 4 at a time, and clear log will clear them all. Okay, now you probably noticed there are a couple of things. I can execute scripts from the debug console, and I can also run specific functions from the log console, from the debug console. For example, I could type display message hello, and I can make a message box appear. I can type add character Justin, coordinate 0, 0, 0, and probably because I'm standing there, so let me do that again, and I can add Justin. So any functions that you would put inside scripts can also be executed while running the game as their own commands. Okay, so I could remove, well, I can't actually because I never gave him an ID, but you get the idea. You can run any script commands that you would put inside a script. You can also run them from the console as well. And that could be useful for, again, diagnosing, debugging your scripts. If you've got a script where, let's say, a display message is not appearing, or let's say, for example, you had this elevator here, for example. When I get on this elevator, I choose a floor and it goes up to that floor, okay? But let's say I clicked it and it didn't go up, okay? So what I could do is I could go to the console and I could type the command that would typically move the platform. So let's just quickly do that. And the name of the waypoint, let's use floor 0. So now what that tells me is that my platform works, okay? Because if I get it to move just on its own outside of a script, it can move. So if it didn't move in my script, then the problem isn't the platform. The problem is obviously how that script is. There's something wrong with the way the script is triggering the platform. Maybe it's not even reaching that bit of the code. Maybe it's stopping before it even gets to the move platform bit. So that can be another reason, another useful way of debugging your scripts is just checking if the thing that's not working works generally anyway outside of the script. Because if it doesn't, if this didn't work, then it means my platform doesn't work. So the problem isn't the script, it's the platform. I need to work out why the platform isn't working. Maybe I didn't set up the waypoints properly, or maybe I didn't give it the right ID or something like that. And if it does work, then I need to go to the script and go, why is it not then triggering the move platform? Maybe, as I say, maybe it's because I've mistyped something with this bit of code in the script, or maybe it's not even reaching this bit in the script, and maybe there's a problem somewhere else. Again, you would debug your script. You'd have print messages throughout your script. Another thing that can be really useful for scripts is, let's say you've got a script that isn't working. Let's say, for example, you had a script where the lift wasn't moving. Let me do it and edit quickly. So let's say you had some code here. This is obviously not valid code. It's just some more code here. Even more code here. And then you finally had your move platform. Now all of these functions would be doing something different. Yeah. So this would be a lift. And then this would be your waypoint. Yeah. So let's say this wasn't working in your script. Okay. But you had some other functions here. Now, depending on what your script is doing, it might be very obvious which one's not working, because maybe these all worked, depending, maybe if this was a display message, the message appeared. If this was adding a character, the character got added. And if this was opening a door, the door opened. So the only thing that's not working is the move platform. So sometimes it can be really obvious which part of your script is not working. But maybe it's not obvious. Maybe instead of maybe your script isn't doing a load of actions, it's doing a lot of if checks and things, and you're not sure which one isn't working. Where in this script is it failing? So again, this would be an instance where you would use debugging. So if you had log message, and then you said line 1 for this line here, and then you had another log message underneath saying line 2, and then you had another log message underneath here saying line 3, and then you had another log message just before the move platform, which is line 4, then what would happen in game is you would see which parts of your script are working. So let's say we saw line 1, we saw line 2, and we saw line 3, but we didn't see line 4. That means the problem isn't this, because it's actually failing before it gets to the move platform. So something here, because if we saw line 3 but we didn't see line 4, then we've isolated the problem to in between those two log messages. So that's something else that can be really valuable for debugging your scripts, is to insert log messages in between your code to help sort of put your code within messages, so that it can help you narrow down which parts of your code are failing if it fails. You only need to do this if it fails, and if you're not sure where it's failing, then this is another good thing to do, is to put log messages in between your lines of code, so you then know which one breaks it, because as soon as it breaks, you won't get your message back. And as long as each message has got an identifier, so line 1, line 2, so you know which one you've reached and which one you haven't seen, then you'll know which bit of code has failed, and therefore which part of your script is the culprit. So it's not this, it was actually this one above. And if you do see line 4, but the lift doesn't move, then you know the problem lies with this function here. It's obviously got a typo or wrong ID or something like that. Anyway, debugging code could be a topic in and of itself, but I just wanted to briefly touch on it in this video because I think it's an important thing to learn early on when you're scripting, because it will just really help, because you're going to have issues with your code. You're starting out, but it's an invaluable thing to learn because it can help you learn so much more about what your code is doing, which in turn will help you fix those issues if you know where the problem has come from, and also have an idea of how to fix that problem. And obviously that will come with experience and the more you get used to coding. But until then, and even when you're a knowledge coder, debugging is invaluable. It's just how you will learn what is going wrong with your scripts. So I swear by it and would absolutely recommend anyone who's scripting makes good use of debugging. So I hope this has been informative. If you have any questions on this topic, because it's, quite a big topic in general, but if you have any questions, obviously do feel free to ask on the Discord. But for now, that'll wrap up this video in this series. Stay tuned for the next one.